She was just 5 years old. Bright-eyed, full of energy, and clutching her favorite stuffed animal as she fell asleep in the comfort of her family's home. But by sunrise, Alayna Ertl was gone. Her bedroom was empty. Her favorite blanket lay crumpled on the floor. And the family's trusted guest, the man they had welcomed into their home the night before, was missing too. What followed was a frantic search, a desperate plea to the public, and a horrifying discovery that shattered a small Minnesota town and left a family broken. This isn't just another kidnapping. This was a betrayal. A monstrous act hiding in plain sight. And it all unfolded in just 19 chilling hours. If you're new here, this is Noir Crime, where we bring you gripping true crime stories every third day, real cases, raw emotion, and the darkest corners of humanity. Now, let's uncover the events behind the murder of Alayna Ertl, a story that begins with trust and ends in unimaginable tragedy. Alayna Jean Ertl was born into a loving, close-knit family in Watkins, Minnesota. Her parents, Matt and Kayla Ertl, were devoted, hard-working people who centered their world around their 3 children. Alayna, the youngest, was known for her joyful energy, bright smile, and wild imagination. She loved dressing up in princess outfits, playing soccer, and drawing with sidewalk chalk on summer evenings. Watkins is a quiet, rural town with a population of just over 900 people. It's the kind of place where doors are left unlocked, and everyone knows each other by name. Crimes, especially violent ones, are almost unheard of. So when the Ertls opened their home to a family friend on the night of August 19, 2016, it wasn't unusual. They believed he was someone they could trust. That man was Zachary Anderson, a 26-year-old acquaintance of Matt's through recreational softball. He wasn't a stranger. In fact, he had stayed at the Ertl home before without issue. That night, he drank beer with Matt, laughed with the family, and eventually went to sleep in the basement. By morning, everything had changed. The morning of August 20, 2016, started like any other for the Ertl family, until it didn't. At around 8 a.m., Kayla Ertl went to check on Alayna in her bedroom. But the room was empty. No child. No blanket. Her small pillow was gone. Kayla immediately called out for her husband, panic rising. Within moments, they realized something even more disturbing: their guest, Zachary Anderson, was gone too. Worse, so was the family's white GMC Sierra pickup truck. Kayla dialed 911 without hesitation. The dispatcher issued an Amber Alert. Law enforcement, both local and federal, jumped in with urgency. A 5-year-old girl had vanished, last seen inside her home, likely taken while her family slept. As hours passed, the small town of Watkins filled with sirens, roadblocks, and helicopters. Investigators scoured nearby woods, questioned neighbors, and followed digital breadcrumbs. The vehicle's OnStar system was activated, allowing authorities to track its movement. By mid-afternoon, the signal pinged from Cass County, over 80 miles away. It was a remote, wooded area near Anderson's family cabin. What they were about to find would send shockwaves across the entire state. By 4:20 p.m. on August 20, 2016, law enforcement had locked onto the location of the stolen truck near a rural cabin in Cass County. Officers approached cautiously, unsure of what they might find. The truck was there. Zachary Anderson was there. But Alayna Ertl was not. Anderson was immediately taken into custody without incident. He was alone, quiet, and offered little resistance. But he refused to say where Alayna was. That silence didn't last long. With daylight fading and urgency growing, officers searched the surrounding woods. Less than a mile from the cabin, deep in a swampy area, they found a disturbing scene: Alayna's small body, partially submerged in water, showing clear signs of trauma. She had been sexually assaulted and murdered. A child taken from her own bed, driven across the state, and brutally killed. The discovery shattered not only the Ertl family but the entire community of Watkins and beyond. What began as a missing child case had turned into a horrifying crime that no one could comprehend. Even the most seasoned investigators were left shaken. And all fingers pointed to the man they had welcomed into their home just hours before. Once Alayna's body was found and Zachary Anderson was in custody, the investigation shifted into high gear. Authorities began piecing together a timeline, how a trusted family friend ended up being the monster behind this brutal crime. Anderson confessed quickly. The details he shared were chilling. After everyone had gone to bed that night, he waited until the house was silent. Then, he walked into Alayna's room, picked her up while she slept, and carried her out to the truck. She never woke up. He drove nearly 2 hours to the cabin his family owned in Cass County. There, over the next several hours, he committed horrific acts that would leave seasoned detectives shaken. Then, sometime in the morning, he killed her and hid her body in a swamp nearby. Anderson offered no real motive, only that he had been drunk, depressed, and out of control. But none of that could ever explain or justify what he had done. This wasn't just a crime, it was a betrayal of trust, a violation of innocence, and a deliberate, calculated act of evil. Investigators built their case swiftly. The evidence, forensic, digital, and physical, was overwhelming. Zachary Anderson was charged with multiple counts, including first-degree murder, criminal sexual conduct, and kidnapping. From the start, he showed little emotion. He entered a guilty plea, avoiding a lengthy trial, but sparing no one from the horror of what had happened. The courtroom was tense as the details were read aloud. Alayna's parents sat in silence, their faces a portrait of unimaginable grief. There were no answers, no reasons that made any sense, just the raw aftermath of a life destroyed. Anderson was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge called the crime beyond comprehension, noting the violation of not just a child, but of a family's trust and a community's peace. Outside the courtroom, Alayna's family spoke briefly. They didn't talk about Anderson. They talked about Alayna, her giggle, her curiosity, her love for her brothers. Her memory, they said, would never be tied only to what happened. It would live on in how they chose to honor her. The community mourned deeply. In Paynesville, purple ribbons lined the streets. Schools held moments of silence. Churches opened their doors for grieving neighbors. Everyone felt the loss. The murder of Alayna Ertl wasn't just the story of a crime, it was the loss of a child who had her whole life ahead of her. A life that should have been filled with scraped knees, bedtime stories, and silly dances in the living room. Instead, it ended at the hands of someone she once called friend. This case forced people to rethink what safety really means. That monsters aren't always strangers in the dark, sometimes, they're people we've invited into our homes. Trusted. Federal laughed with. For the Ertl family, the days are now counted in befores and afters. But in the face of such overwhelming heartbreak, they chose remembrance over bitterness. And in a world where stories like Alayna's can be forgotten in headlines and time, it's our responsibility to remember. To say her name. To never let the innocence of her smile be reduced to just another statistic. If this story left you shaken, you're not alone. Alayna Ertl's case is one that stays with you, not just because of how horrifying it was, but because of how real it felt. A child, taken by someone her family trusted. It's every parent's worst nightmare. At Noir Crime, we're committed to telling stories that matter, stories that deserve to be heard, remembered, and learned from. If Alayna's story moved you, take a second to honor her memory by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because spreading awareness can be powerful. Make sure to subscribe to Noir Crime if you haven't already. We dive deep into true crime cases that demand attention, with new stories every third day. And if you've got thoughts, questions, or even cases you want us to cover, drop them in the comments below. Your voice matters here. Let's keep these conversations alive, for the victims who can't speak for themselves anymore, and for the justice they still deserve. This was More Crime. Stay safe. Stay sharp. And never stop asking the hard questions.